Hi, I'm Brittany, and today we're here with Ed Emmons. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for having me.
And talk a little bit about his background and the book he's written. So, if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, I started out as a heavy equipment and truck mechanic. I did that for 15 years and decided it's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I worked 80 to 100 hours a week and dirty, miserable job. So I was looking for something that would give me other options, and one late night when I got home, I saw an infomercial on TV with Carlton Sheets. It was how to buy real estate with no money down, and I think they wanted $150 for it. So I said I'd give it a shot. I bought the course, followed it the best I could, and I ended up buying 12 condominiums my first year with no money.
Wow. What kind of investment opportunities are there as far as real estate?
Well, there's a lot of different things. If you can just imagine every building, every property that you see, somebody owns it and is making money off of it. So it could be a hospital, it could be strip malls, it can be regular houses, condominiums, campgrounds, even the forest. People are making money off the forest. So there's so many ways. There's also the banks, they make money from the mortgages, which you can have a mortgage and make money on it too. So there's just as many ways as you can come up with ideas, really, to make money with real estate.
Interesting. And you had mentioned condominiums. How did you get into that? What did that look like?
Well, the advantage to a condominium, I knew nothing about real estate or repair work, and a condominium is just within the sheetrock is all you have to worry about. So you don't have to worry about a roof or a well or a foundation. And where I lived in Connecticut, there was a lot of condominiums. At that time in 1992, I believe the government agency was the RTC. They had so many foreclosures on the market, and I could buy a condominium at auction for about $20,000, where the mortgage was $90,000 on it. So I bought a lot of these condos for $20,000, $30,000, and then fixed them up. Inside, it was usually just ripping all the garbage out, changing the carpets, painting it, which I could do, and sometimes there'd be like an hour or a day's work for a carpenter, and I'd hire him for the day, but everything else I'd do myself, and it was something I could do even while I'm a mechanic.
How did you learn to do all of those things, only having to hire out the few things you did?
Well, all I did was paint and rip things out. So anybody could do that. Cut up carpet, pull it out, haul to the dump, and paint. I could do that. And then as I watched the carpenter do things, I figured, well, I think I can do that. And now I can do any of it because I've done enough of them. But that's how I got started.
Awesome, thank you. After the condominiums, how did you get to where you are now? If you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, I moved from Connecticut to Maine, and in central Maine, when I moved here, there were no condominiums. So I bought some cheap houses, single-family houses, but I didn't know the area, and I bought some places where I shouldn't have, and I ended up sitting on them for quite a while, actually almost 2 years, but I rented it out in the meantime, and I sold it for a profit, but it was an education for different part. And then I realized where I had to buy, and I then bought lots of other single-family houses and branched out into multi-families and trailer parks, campground, rooming houses, just everything, but I bought in the right locations now that I knew the area.
I see. What was your motivation to get into the real estate business?
I wanted to replace my mechanic's income as soon as possible. So I was looking for residual rental cash flow. And then once I had enough cash flow to replace my, or cover my expenses, then I started flipping them for bonus money.
Okay. How soon were you able to do that after you started with the condominiums?
Very early on. I bought the course, and then I would say about a month later, I bought my first condominium.
Mhm.
And then by the time I had done 4 or 5 of them, I started picking up little extras, like I learned how to do some light carpentry work, a little bit of sheetrock work here and there, and then eventually I got to the point where I can do a whole house now, so it's just done enough of them.
Awesome. Are you still active in real estate investing?
I have I've sold most of my units. I had about a little over 200 rentals at one time, and I'm down to about 75 now. I own 3 trailer parks and a 3 family building, and then a few single family houses that I rent out. And then I have, I'm holding mortgage on several properties that I sold. And then I've got 4 flips I'm doing right now, plus some mobile homes that we're redoing in the park. So I am sort of still invested.
I see. And when you got started, did you have a lot of money in the bank, or how did you get started?
Yeah, I had about $700 to my name. The very first one I did, I found a cosigner.
Okay.
And then I had a pretty good reputation in the area for being honest, so I found 3 people that would give me $10,000 to invest, and I gave them 10% interest back then. So I borrowed $30,000 for the next condo, which I paid probably 20 something for, so the 30 covered my fix-up costs, and I sold that within probably 2 months. So I got their money back, and they liked that 10% return, so they did it again, and it just branched out from there.
Absolutely awesome. Do you think that's something that a lot of people could do if with the right people around them?
Oh yeah. It helps if you have some integrity. That's the most important thing. But co-signing you can do. You could also bring in a partner who has money but doesn't have the time. There's a lot of creative ways. There's a lot of people out there who have a lot of money and aren't real comfortable with it in the stock market. They don't want their 1 or 2% in a CD. So they're looking for ways that they feel is safe, that they can put their money and get a good return. So if you have no money, you could do a 50-50 split with someone. You know, if you're going to make $20,000, 10 for you, 10 for them, people are up to that. They're interested in that.
How do you think you go about finding those people?
If you, in any given area, there's usually real estate investor meetups, or different civic groups meet. The Better Business Bureau has some, the Kiwanis has some, where business people get together and just talk and network, and you find out that, you know, tell people what you do, and other people will, who are interested, will perk up and ask questions, and you'll find them that way.
Interesting. So you recently wrote a book, Real Estate Investing Made Simple. What drove you to write this book?
I've had a lot of people ask me for help, and I just don't have time to do it all on one-on-one for a lot of people. So actually I was going through some medical rehab, and I decided to put it all together in a book. And I was listening to a podcast for real estate people, and there was about 500 people on the podcast, and they did a survey of how many properties the listeners had bought, and 84% had bought 1 house or less.
Okay.
There was only 3 or 4% who had done over 10, and the rest were in between. So I said, that's where the market is, people who need to get started. So that's what I wrote the book primarily for. But there's other things in there about mobile home parks and larger multifamilies that people could use that, you know, have some experience. I wouldn't recommend that as your first purchase.
A large mobile home.
Yeah, I mean, you want to, if you're going to make mistakes, you want to do it on a small scale, and then learn from those little deals, and then when you get something big, you know kind of what you're doing.
What do you think is a large take home for this in your book?
I think if somebody reads through it, they'll be comfortable in investing in real estate. That's what my aim was. So some people think that's a daunting task to go out and buy a house. I can look at a house in 10 minutes and decide if I want to buy it or not. And sometimes I've bought them in 10 minutes. So once you get comfortable with it, you know what you're buying, you know what it's worth, you know what your profits are. It's very easy. I find it fun. So that's what I tried to get across in that book. So a new person could go into it not being nervous.
And you have a section in here about the things that you look at when you look at a home or look at a mobile home. Can you elaborate on some of those?
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, you're looking at, let's say you're going to an auction. You first of all, you got to look at the physical features of the house. Look for major problems like foundation. If you have water dripping in, usually that's a major problem. So you get a visual of it, but then you've got to do the research to find out the title. Who owns this property? And what do they actually own? Are there liens on the property? Are there boundary line disputes, which I just recently found on one? Is there good water? Is there good septic? So those are things you can find out from the neighbors, usually is a good sign, but then you can also go to a registry of deeds or some other municipalities will record information like that as public knowledge, so you can research that. I'll also go to the town hall, find out what the taxes are, liens. The code enforcer will know a lot about property many times. So just gathering as much information as you can so you really know what you're looking at.
Interesting. Let's see. So the property that we're in right now is one of the properties that you own now, and that's a B&B.
Right.
How did you come to acquire it?
Well, I bought the land. There's actually 2 lots here. They're wooded lots, and they're the last ones in a subdivision. So I bought 2 lots for the price of 1. And then I cleared the land and developed it. I have heavy equipment, so I know how to do that end of it. And then I came across half of this home from an insurance claim. They claimed it was totaled, but I couldn't find out what was wrong with it. And I had a couple people who move mobile homes, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with it. So I bought the first half for almost nothing, and then I had the manufacturer build me the second half, which made it up to it. And then we put it on this slab, and now I've got a home.
That's very interesting. And you Airbnb it, right?
Right.
So it sounds like you're in a lot of different things. You have the mobile homes, the Airbnb, the rentals, and things like that. What would you say is your favorite part, your most lucrative?
The Airbnb was an experiment. This was my first attempt at it, so I'm kind of curious to see how it works out. And it seems like it's going to work out fairly well. The Airbnb has a kind of an uncertainty about it right now. More and more people or town municipalities are putting restrictions on them because you're taking away hotel business. So I wouldn't bank my future on Airbnbs, but as long as it works, it looks pretty good. I like mobile home parks. They've been very profitable for me. The most lucrative of anything is what we have here in Maine, which is rooming houses. It's basically like a bed and breakfast type situation or a hostel. Although I don't provide the meals, there is shared kitchen, and they all have beds and so forth in them. They make about 3 times what a multi-family building will per square foot. Wow. So that's the most profitable, but it's very management intensive.
Okay.
It's short-term stay. It could be a few days. It could be a month. It's not like long-term rental.
And when you have those, do you usually have a property manager, or do you manage that yourself?
In the beginning, I managed myself, so I know what I was doing or what I should expect out of a property manager. But then I found that I don't have the temperament to deal with certain class of people, so I hired people. I actually have employees now that do my managing. If I would either do it that way or I'd hire a management company. But
Mhm.
since I have everything in place, I use employees.
I see. Okay. And you also have you've had many mobile home parks. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that looks like and purchasing them and
It's something like an apartment building in a sense. You have multiple units. When I buy larger properties, I look at the price per unit. And a mobile home park, I could buy at, as an example, one of them I bought at $8,500 per unit.
Mhm.
You can't buy an apartment building for $8,500 per unit. So there are different types of expenses with it, but the net income is considerably higher per unit for me than it was in apartment buildings.